What happens when a CEO pulls on a name tag, mops a greasy floor at 2 in the morning, and comes face to face with the kind of pain spreadsheets never show? Nathaniel Evers had inherited the fast food chain from his father 5 years ago. 15 locations across the state, all profitable, all busy, especially the ones open 24 hours. He ran everything from the head office, contracts, supply lines, store margins. But lately, something felt off. Late-night complaints were rising. A few anonymous emails mentioned mistreatment. Not enough to launch a full investigation, but enough to keep him up at night. He needed to see it himself. So he dyed the gray out of his beard, shaped it closer to his jaw, tossed the suits, and borrowed an old beat-up sedan from one of the warehouse drivers. His name tag read Nate. He'd never met the employees at the Southgate location store 13. It was far from headquarters, and turnover was high. No photos of him hung on the wall. No one had reason to recognize the owner walking in wearing non-slip shoes and a wrinkled polo. He showed up just before the 11 p.m. shift change. New trainee. The night supervisor, a tall guy with thinning hair and a faded tattoo on his right wrist, looked him over. "You better not be soft, we don't babysit here." Nate gave a quick nod. "I'm good." The man didn't introduce himself. Inside, the place smelled like fryer oil and exhaustion. The dining area was mostly empty, save for one guy sleeping against the window. The kitchen buzzed with noise, freezer doors slamming, timers beeping, conversations short and tired. Nate got thrown onto dishes. A kid named Mickle showed him how to scrape congealed cheese off plastic trays while juggling 6 orders on the screen. "You're fast," Mickle said, wiping sweat off his forehead with a napkin. "You worked food before." "Yeah." "Long time ago." "Feels like forever every night," Mickle muttered, then called out, "Where's the shift lead?" "Breakin' again," someone shouted back. At 1 a.m., the pace picked up. 2 rideshare drivers came in, then a group of college kids, then a woman with a screaming toddler. Nate turned to help at the counter, but the supervisor barked, "Stay back there. You don't touch the register until I say so." It wasn't until close to 2:30 that things really cracked. A man in his early 30s rushed in, still wearing a worn UPS jacket. He had dark circles under his eyes and a quiet, tired energy. He clocked in and headed straight to the fryer without a word. Nate caught his name Caleb when someone shouted for more fries. 15 minutes later, the supervisor stormed in from the back office. "Caleb," he snapped. "You're 30 minutes late." Again, Caleb didn't stop dropping nuggets into the oil. "I had to wait for my sitter. She was running behind. You think I care? This is a job, not your personal daycare. You want hours, show up on time." "I worked a double shift at UPS," Caleb said quietly. "My daughter's sick. I'm doing the best I can." "That your excuse every week?" The supervisor stepped closer. "I don't care about your kid. You're not special. You show up late again, you're gone. Got it?" Nate's hands froze on the mop handle. Caleb didn't argue. He just nodded, lips pressed tight, then turned back to the fryer. The kitchen went silent for a beat. Then the noise returned, orders, footsteps, the buzz of fluorescent lights. Nate felt his stomach twist. He'd heard stories like this. Never expected to see one unfold 10 feet away. He pushed through the rest of the shift, keeping his head down. Caleb worked like a machine. He didn't talk much, but Nate noticed him helping others, even taking over the register when the other guy needed a break. At 4:45, Caleb wiped down the prep table and grabbed his coat. "Heading home?" Nate asked, stacking trays beside him. "Yeah," Caleb said, voice low. "Gotta get my girl to her doctor by 7. Nate nodded. "Hope she feels better." Caleb gave him a tired smile and walked out. After the door shut, the supervisor leaned against the counter and muttered, "Guy's a mess. Always dragging his personal crap in here." Nate gritted his teeth and turned away. By 5:15, the cleaning was done. The morning crew started trickling in. Nate signed out, tossed his apron in the bin, and stepped into the cool morning air. He sat in his car for a long time. His phone buzzed with emails. He didn't check them. Back at the office that afternoon, he didn't call legal or corporate. He didn't schedule a meeting. He just booked himself a return shift at store 13 for the next night. He wasn't done yet. Nate returned the following night just after 10:30, earlier than before, parking along the side of the building where the security lights flickered and the concrete was cracked. This time he wore a different shirt, same shoes, same name tag. He walked in through the back unnoticed at first until a short woman with a clipboard glanced up from inventory. "You back again?" she asked, adjusting her glasses with the back of her hand. "Yeah." "Said I should finish training." She nodded, distracted, then pointed toward the kitchen. "Jump in on prep, we're already behind." Nate found Mickwell slicing pickles at the back counter, radio earbuds tucked under his hat. The kid looked more drained than the night before, jaw tense, hands moving on autopilot. "You good?" Nate asked, grabbing gloves. Mickwell shrugged, not looking up. "Didn't sleep. My sister's kid was up coughing all night, but I'm not calling out." "Not with rent due. Anyone else show up yet? Just us and Angela. Rest or late?" Angela was the woman with the clipboard. She kept glancing toward the monitor above the drive-through station, tapping her pen as the minutes ticked down toward the rush. By 11:15, the supervisor arrived. Same guy, no greeting, just a wave toward the front. Nate took a position at the fryers. No one had reassigned him, but no one stopped him either. Strange how quickly the rhythm returned. The routine was mechanical, but the tension in the air felt sharper than the night before. Angela moved with precision, but her eyes kept darting toward the hallway where the office sat. Mickwell worked faster than necessary. Nate could feel the pressure, but it wasn't from the customers. At midnight, a woman in a red apron arrived, breathless and slightly damp from the rain outside. She clocked in without a word and went straight to wiping down the drink station. "Hey," Nate said quietly as she passed. "Long night," she gave a tired laugh. "Started my shift at the gas station at 4. They cut someone so I stayed late, back to back, for the third day in a row. But they changed my schedule last minute here, so I didn't want to risk getting dropped." She was gone before Nate could ask her name. Orders started piling up around one. A food delivery driver stood at the counter, arms crossed, waiting 10 minutes for 2 family meals. Angela apologized twice, but the man left angry. The supervisor watched from the office doorway, arms folded. "Maybe if people showed up on time," he muttered. Angela turned to him. "I've already called 2 backups." "It's not the crew's fault. You should have planned better. We've been short all week. You approved the schedule." He didn't answer, just walked back inside. By 1:30, Caleb walked in. He didn't speak to anyone, just tied his apron and stepped in beside Nate at the fryers. "Need help on ticket 33, someone called." "Got it," Caleb said. His pace was steady, even sharper than the night before. Nate noticed how he adjusted the oil temperature without being asked, how he prepped extra patties without being told there was a rush coming. He didn't talk unless necessary, but his presence steadied the line. Nate worked beside him in silence for a while. "You okay?" he asked eventually. Caleb didn't look up. "Fine. Your daughter doing better?" A pause, then a nod. "Fever broke this morning." "That's good. Still need to find someone to watch her tomorrow. My neighbor backed out." "You don't have family nearby?" "No one left." They flipped baskets in sync. Caleb's movements were smooth, practiced. Nate noticed the way he shielded his wrist from the steam, where a faint scar peeked out from beneath his sleeve. "You ever think about quitting?" Nate asked. Caleb didn't smile. "Every day. But my kid needs food, and I'm not going to risk losing the only job that still pays me on time." There was no bitterness in his voice, just a kind of resignation that settled deep in the chest. At 2:15, things ground to a halt. The register froze. Angela called for a restart, and while the system rebooted, the supervisor emerged again. "What now?" "POS locked up," Angela said. Restarting, the supervisor leaned against the counter and sighed loudly. "This is why we need better people." Angela didn't flinch. "The system's 2 years out of date. Because you keep breaking it," he snapped. "We don't have control over the software." "You always have an answer, huh?" Angela opened her mouth, then closed it. She turned back to the screen. Nate stepped forward. "System logs everything. If it's software, it's not on her." The supervisor looked at him like he'd forgotten he was there. "You don't speak unless someone asks you to." Nate held his gaze. "I've seen her doing 3 people's work. She doesn't need to be blamed for a system delay." There was a long beat of silence. Caleb turned from the fryer, eyes narrowing. Mickwell looked up from the prep station. Even the girl at the drink machine stopped wiping. The supervisor's voice dropped. You want to run this place, be my guest." Then he turned and walked straight out the back door. No one said a word for several seconds. Angela exhaled slowly and went back to tapping at the register. By 3, things had quieted again. A lull in orders gave the crew a moment to breathe. Caleb leaned against the prep counter, rolling his shoulder. "You always speak up like that," he asked Nate. "Only when someone deserves it." Caleb gave a small nod. "You knew, kind of, just filling in." "Well," Caleb said, straightening, "don't get used to it. This place burns through people." "You ever thought about being a shift lead?" Nate asked. Caleb laughed once. "They offered. I turned it down." "Why?" "Didn't want to be the guy making everyone else's life harder." Angela passed behind them with a tray of refills. "He's not lying," she said. "That's what they train you to do now. Keep labor low, push people harder, and ignore the rest." "Sounds familiar," Nate said, watching her walk back toward the front. The rain had picked up outside, tapping against the drive-through window in steady rhythm. Mickwell leaned against the sink, eyes half closed. "You ever talk to the higher-ups?" Nate asked, lowering his voice. Angela looked over. "They don't come here, they send surveys, never follow up." "What about the district manager? Shows up once a month, stays 20 minutes, talks more about signage than anything else." "Last time we asked for new headset batteries. He said to clean the old ones better." Nate didn't respond. He just watched the condensation build on the window, the reflection of the crew moving behind him. By 4:15, the flow picked up again. Orders came in bursts. Caleb took over the register when the front crew fell behind. Angela coordinated the drive-through and kept the line moving. Mickwell handled prep without direction. No one waited for instruction. They just worked. The supervisor never returned. At 5, Nate slipped off his apron and washed his hands. He stepped outside and leaned against the brick wall, watching the first hints of daylight stretch across the parking lot. The streetlights flickered off one by one. Inside, the team was still moving, still working, still holding the place together. They didn't need a manager who barked orders. They needed someone who noticed the weight they were carrying and did something about it. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to his assistant. One line: "Schedule a mandatory meeting for store 13. Noon, my office." Then, for the first time in weeks, he smiled. Not because things were better, but because now he knew exactly where to start. The conference room blinds were half drawn, casting long diagonal shadows across the oak table. Nathaniel sat at the head, no longer in disguise. His blazer was crisp, shirt collar unbuttoned at the top, sleeves rolled once at the cuff. The usual boardroom silence felt heavier than usual. He was waiting. At exactly noon, the door opened. Angela stepped in first, her expression unreadable. Her hair was tied back tightly, and she wore a clean staff hoodie zipped halfway. Caleb followed, jeans still damp from the morning rain. He looked uncertain, scanning the room before settling into a seat by the far wall. Mickwell came in behind them, eyes flicking to Nathaniel, then quickly away. 3 more employees trickled in, 2 from the morning crew, 1 from drive-through. They looked cautious, not sure if they were in trouble or about to be asked to cover another shift. Then the regional manager arrived, clipboard in hand, confused to find them all already seated. He hesitated at the door. "Should I?" "Sit," Nathaniel said. "You'll want to hear this." The man obeyed. Nathaniel waited until the door clicked shut behind the last arrival. Then he stood. "I've owned this company for 5 years. Most of you didn't know that because I haven't stepped foot inside store 13 since the day I took over. I could give you a reason for that, but I won't insult anyone here by pretending distance is the same as leadership." Angela's jaw tightened slightly. Caleb's fingers tapped once against his knee, then stopped. "I worked 2 consecutive night shifts last week under a fake name. What I saw made it clear I've failed to protect the people who keep this company alive." The room was still. Nathaniel turned toward the regional manager. "You visited the Southgate store last month, correct?" "I did." "Did you speak to any night staff?" "I spoke to the shift lead on duty. I didn't see a need to speak to the rest of the team." "It was a scheduled inspection. Did you report back any concerns about staffing, burnout, or equipment? I noted some delays in order times. I suggested retraining." Nathaniel nodded once. "You missed the fact that your night supervisor was threatening staff. using intimidation to cover for his own incompetence and leaving shifts repeatedly without authorization. The manager looked down, lips pressed shut. Nathaniel turned back to the employees. I saw you all keep that store running without leadership. I watched one of you cover 2 stations at once, while being ignored. I watched another work through a 12-hour turnaround without ever once asking for sympathy. I watched someone show up late not out of laziness, but because he was choosing between a paycheck and his daughter's safety. He looked at Caleb. Caleb stared back, quiet but steady. I'm not here to hand out apologies. I'm here to fix what I broke by stepping away. Angela spoke first. What happens now? The night supervisor is already terminated. His access was cut this morning. He won't be returning. No one said anything, but a shift went through the room, a tension released in the shoulders, a subtle exhale. You'll be receiving hazard pay for the last 30 days retroactively. It won't undo what happened, but it's a start. We're also assigning a new field operations lead to oversee staffing at night locations. Direct reporting, no more filters. Mickwell looked up. Is that someone from corporate? No, it's going to be Angela. Angela blinked. I'm not. I watched you run that store better than anyone above you. You didn't just hold the shift together. You kept people from falling apart. That's more valuable than any title we hand out. She looked stunned, but didn't protest again. Nathaniel continued. We're increasing overnight staffing minimums. No more single coverage in the front during peak hours. We're also rolling out a paid childcare support program starting next quarter for employees with dependents. Not a discount, real assistance. Caleb's posture changed for the first time, slightly straighter. Still guarded, but something behind his eyes came alive. Mickwell gave a short laugh under his breath. That real? Nathaniel nodded. Fully funded, you'll get the details this week. The room grew quiet again, then Caleb leaned forward. What happens when people stop watching again? Nathaniel didn't flinch. Fair question. I don't plan to stop watching. I'm assigning a rotation where every executive, including myself, works 1 full shift a month in store. No notice. No exceptions. You'll see us again, but next time you'll know who we are. Angela raised an eyebrow. You're going to work kitchen. I'll be wherever I'm needed. She tilted her head, skeptical but intrigued. One of the morning crew members, a woman who hadn't spoken yet, cleared her throat. Does that mean we can give feedback directly? Yes, Nathaniel said. And you'll be paid for your time doing so. Caleb looked at him. Why now? Nathaniel paused, then sat again. Because I saw someone get told their daughter didn't matter, and I watched him take it, not because he agreed, but because he couldn't afford not to. And when I looked around, I realized no one with power had ever stepped in to stop that from happening. That's not a business problem. It's a leadership failure. Mine, Caleb nodded once. No words, but something in his expression settled. Nathaniel looked around the room. You've been holding this company up while we've been studying dashboards. That ends today. He stood again. You'll receive updated contracts by next week. If you choose to stay, you'll be doing so with better support than you've ever had. And if you decide to leave, I'll understand, but I hope you'll stay, because I don't want to rebuild this without the people who already know how to do it right. He stepped back, letting the silence stretch. Angela stood slowly. If you mean what you said, then I'm in. Caleb nodded beside her. Same, Mickwell grinned, tired but genuine. Guess I'm not quitting after all. The meeting broke shortly after. Nathaniel stayed behind, watching them leave one by one. No handshakes, no ceremony, just a quiet understanding. As the door shut behind the last of them, the regional manager turned toward him, still seated at the far end. I didn't know it was that serious, he said. You should have. Nathaniel picked up the clipboard that had been left on the table and handed it back. No more inspections. From now on, we do presents, not paperwork. The man gave a slow nod, then left the room. Nathaniel stood alone in the silence, the hum of the office faint in the background. Not everything could be solved in a day. But the first real step had been taken by walking through a back door in silence, wearing a name tag that didn't belong to him. Now, he had his name back, and a responsibility to carry it differently. The Southgate store floor looked different under daylight. The neon buzz was drowned out by natural light cutting through the wide front windows. The place still smelled like fryer oil, but it was cleaner, somehow quieter, steadier. Nathaniel stood near the back, no disguise this time. He wore a company polo, pressed but plain, and kept his watch in his pocket. He was there to be seen, not timed. Angela was already working the register, training a new hire, someone fresh, early 20s, wide-eyed and tense. She kept her tone measured, her instructions short and clear. No one hovered over her. She didn't need anyone to. Beside the prep station, Caleb moved with purpose, not speed. The difference was subtle but unmistakable. He glanced up when he saw Nathaniel, not surprised, just acknowledging, like seeing someone who belonged now. "You following me again?" Caleb asked over the sound of a drive-through order being read aloud. "Not this time," Nathaniel said. "Just checking in." Caleb loaded a tray and handed it off to the runner, then leaned against the counter for a moment. "Training's been different this week. Angela's running it tighter, but people actually stick around after their first shift. You think they'll stay? Depends how long the changes last. They're not temporary." Caleb gave a short nod. "Then maybe I'll stop looking for warehouse jobs every other weekend." Behind them, Mickwell emerged from the dry storage area, balancing a box of lids on one shoulder. He set them down by the drink station and rolled his neck. "Hey," Nathaniel said. "How's the new schedule working out?" Mickwell rubbed the back of his hand, where a faint burn was healing. "Better. I'm not closing and opening anymore. Still tired, but it's the kind of tired that makes sense." Nathaniel tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Mickwell shrugged. "Before, it felt like no matter how hard I worked, I was always behind. Like the system was built to wear us down. Now it's just a job, still hard but not hostile." Nathaniel didn't respond right away. He let the words settle. He moved toward the break room, where Angela was just finishing a conversation with one of the newer hires. They exchanged a quick nod before she turned to him. "You didn't say you were coming by," she said. Didn't want to make it formal. She crossed her arms, not in defiance but out of habit. "That's how things usually go wrong. No one says anything until it's too late. That's not how we're doing it anymore." Angela glanced toward the kitchen. "You notice anything different today?" Nathaniel followed her gaze. The line was running smooth. Orders were being called out evenly. The tension he'd seen before, the guarded looks, the hesitation, it was gone. "The energy's different," he said. "It's not just the crew," she said. "We got updated equipment 2 days ago, headsets that actually hold a charge, POS software patched. And someone from corporate called to ask how the overnight workflow could be redesigned for fewer gaps." "You think it's performative?" "I think it's overdue," she said. "But I also think you're serious, and that's why it's working." He nodded once. "You said yes to the field ops position." No hesitation. "I didn't take it to climb. I took it because I don't trust people who have never had to clean a soda machine at 2 in the morning to write policies for people who do." Nathaniel smiled faintly, then caught himself. "I want you to write the new overnight orientation." Angela raised an eyebrow. "You don't already have one." "We have something, but it doesn't reflect what the job actually is. I want new hires to understand what they're walking into. Then they need to hear from the ones who stayed through the worst of it. Bring them in, pay them to help build it." She studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. "I'll set it up." He stepped back into the main floor, watching the crew rotate through stations. No one lingered. No one dragged, but no one looked hunted either. Outside, a beat-up sedan pulled into a space near the front. A young girl climbed out of the back seat, clutching a sketchbook. Caleb walked to the front door, wiped his hands on a towel, and stepped out to meet her. He crouched down, said something that made her laugh, then led her inside, seating her at the corner booth with a milkshake already waiting. Nathaniel didn't interrupt. He just watched. Angela came up beside him. "He brings her in now, during shift." "Just after," Nathaniel said. "I told him we'd cover his last 30 minutes so he wouldn't have to rush to daycare." "She's quiet. She draws," Nathaniel said. "Says it helps her when her chest hurts." Angela's expression shifted, not softening, but deepening, like someone who understood what it meant to carry more than your own weight. Across the restaurant, a young crew member dropped a drink lid. Caleb picked it up before the kid could bend down and tossed it in the trash without a word. No lecture, no look, just a simple gesture unnoticed by most. Nathaniel checked the time, then walked toward the back. In the office, the new shift lead for nights was finalizing payroll entries. A woman who'd transferred from another store, quiet, methodical, respected. She didn't look up when he entered. "System treating you better?" he asked. "Doesn't crash anymore. That's new. Need anything?" She tapped a few keys, checked a number, then finally turned to him. "One thing. Can we get a locked drawer for employee belongings? Too many people still keep their wallets in coat pockets. I'll have it installed this week." "Thanks." He left her to it. By the time he stepped back outside, the sun had shifted. The lunch crowd was beginning to trickle in. Drivers, students, 2 construction workers in orange vests. The kitchen adjusted without being told. The line adjusted without complaint. Nathaniel took a seat near the window, just a few tables from where Caleb's daughter was now flipping through her sketchbook. She looked up once, then went back to her drawing. Angela passed by on her way to the front. She paused just long enough to say, "You planning to stay the whole shift?" "Not this time." "Good, we've got it covered," he nodded. No need to remind her of that. He watched the crew for another few minutes, then stood, pushed in his chair, and walked toward the door. No announcement, no farewell. He stepped into the sunlight, the door swinging shut behind him, and got into his car without looking back. The store would run without him now, not because they didn't need leadership, but because they finally had it where it mattered. He didn't need to be on the floor to know when something was broken anymore. He'd learned how to see it, and more importantly, he'd learned how to listen.